Stern buggy, yeah. We
Okay.
have a couple of Volkswagen things, the
Yes, yes, yes.
slab side.
I'm gonna
They drive
kill
for
the
me.
stream we've got now and start. Well, maybe I can stop the recorder.
Yeah, well,
Will that
they've
stop the
released,
screen?
I think maybe 3.
Stop recording. Yes.
Yeah, no, my Blake picked up Helen.
Start
Blake
recording.
picked up Helen and told her that he drove her
Streaming.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Volkswagen thing.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Hey, I think we're flying.
The old joke, the two guys were talking about their dates last night. And one said, yeah, I took the girl out and she said we could get in with the back seat if I put the top down. I said, 3 hours later we were in the back seat. He says, how come so long? I said, I'm going to convertible.
What? Mm-mm. That's right. Do that. Well, here we are, 10 minutes early. I probably could have had breakfast.
Are you ready to go? Working?
I think so. I think it's all
That
working.
doesn't look like us.
It's not.
No.
But we'll, that is my preview picture.
Oh, I see.
Sorry, Steve. I feel your pain.
Scott.
For Scott.
Yeah.
It always works like that for me as well.
Well, very frustrating. To test my stream, I have to connect my laptop to my cell phone because it's coming out of my house and they get confused. And this morning, it worked for a second, but the stream didn't work. And then I make some changes, and then I can't get connected to the internet through my cell phone anymore. I don't know what's going on with that. So I felt, when you saw it working, I'm like, yes, because I was done
Because all I
testing at
ever
that
see is
point.
that little window saying connecting.
Right.
Connecting. Connecting.
Well, you watch me like try and talk through the frustration of things not working.
Oh yeah. It's fine. You just muddle along.
This is
You know, we got H323 video conferencing working in the division just fine.
Oh yeah.
But nobody wants to take the class to video conferencing.
No.
So those have died. So now all the
Yep.
video conferencing units are like carts. And then they're just sort of neglected and left in the corner.
Yep.
Nobody can find a working port or anything like that. So, you know, that's dying on the vine. So now they're all doing Zoom and Skype.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nobody can get that working either because, you know, that requires thought, foresight, and all that kind of stuff.
What was the
It's sort of like, call them. Use the phone.
What was the very first video conferencing rooms that you set up? What that was, it had a system name, didn't it? Like,
Are you talking about the Cisco stuff?
yeah, the very first.
That was John's moniker. He
Yeah.
came up with that himself, the Voice Video Vantage.
Oh, okay.
And everybody still calls him 3V. DC. John's gone.
How many dollars were in each one of those rooms?
That was the third when they went to San Miguel.
Mike's hanging out of the seat. Yeah, well, not really.
No, those are big.
You
2019.
But they never got used.
They still are. They still are because we're teaching Math 31 for Grand
Yeah.
Jasper.
Yeah.
We're teaching all over the place.
No, they use that. They still use that system.
Why not? It always works.
Yeah. There you go.
Other than nobody's going to support me with money.
I know.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Maybe Copper Canyon? No, April 3rd. That was a fun
so there's a smile over there, Scott. Something went right.
Oh, I'm just messing with my camera, making sure everything's in place,
Yeah,
doing
now
the
you're gonna
thing.
hit a button. It's gonna go.
It's all gonna blow up in my face.
Yeah. Blue screen of death.
I tried watching.
It's been years since I've seen one of those.
Facebook yesterday, and then all I got was Windows 7 at the alley. Picture came coming up. The video was there for like a few seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And then the picture would come up on the display. The audio was still there.
I mean, I
Got an entire.
By the way, you can't use Cheryl for checking today.
Oh,
She's not at home.
tonight.
Well, the
Yes.
neurologist looked at it.
She's
Yeah,
not at
is
home.
she off of-
So she might be hooked in, but I doubt if she's listening to San Carlos Computer Club.
You know, Gary, many times I've ended up recording just like this ambient noise for like 10 minutes before we've started, and I keep it on a please wait, that Tetekawi picture. And so later on, I switch it over to video, and so you can see all of us talking. And then I switch it over.
Do the ratings go up or down when you do that?
Uh,
The ratings, viewers, go up or down?
Does it go up or down? You mean all 13 people? Hey,
Your all-time high is how many?
actually, my all-time high was over 20. I thought that was pretty cool.
We have some kind
You
of
have to wonder who they are.
national emergency in San Carlos. They dialed you up.
That's right. Well, I figured they must have canceled the Rotary meeting.
Well, that's pretty riveting stuff.
Yeah.
Now he can't walk, he can't talk.
What else? There's a couple of things that go on Tuesdays that people tell me, oh, I would be there, but I've got such and such going on.
Yeah. I used to run the town council meeting video equipment. They recorded it and then they put it up on the local Shaw cable. And what a rigmarole on VHS, 3 cameras, and a mixing board.
Color mejor. Caliente mejor.
It's a great shot of the top of my head.
Got 5 minutes.
I can't believe how early I am.
I'll start counting down.
I can't believe all this stuff is working already.
I'm gonna count down in 10 seconds. I'll start the countdown.
It's like a rocket launch.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hey, did anybody see the heavy,
The Tesla go up?
Yeah.
No. I think I saw a replay of it.
I saw the video where the 2 boosters
Yes.
come back.
That was
impressive.
That was very cool.
I don't think NASA ever thought that would be possible.
Oh God. No, does this one come back to land, or is it the one that goes on the barge? Lands on the barge.
Well, the one you're talking about came back to land.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, 2 came back to land. The one on the barge didn't.
Well, they've succeeded. They've got it to come down on the barge successfully.
Yeah, that was when they were practicing.
Yeah, I know. But it's really spectacular when it blows up. It's awful lot of fun.
Well, everybody thinks there's aliens invading us when they see the vapor trail of the rock.
Coming down.
Well, what was that a while back? They did a launch, and we could see it in the sky over here. I knew that on Facebook, people from Wymus were sharing this image in the sky going, what the hell is this?
From Vandenberg, California.
Yeah, from California.
Because the sun, it's dark here, but the sun is still shining on the vapor trail.
Mm.
We were traveling to Disneyland. Come down coast there. There was this green thing going. What are Northern Lights doing?
Yeah.
Right.
They tested anti-missile missile at I guess what is it?
Esmeralda Port from Mars. Go to sleep. Yeah. It's the only way I operate. Mass Cafe.
Well, I wonder if we should start. We're going to bring today's computer club to order.
Sure you are.
A semblance of order as Jim's walking in the door. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome one and all to our regular San Carlos Computer Club meeting. I'm Scott Stimpson from International Computer Solutions, and I'm here to help you, wade through this tech jungle and answer some of the questions that have been gnawing at your brain. This morning, I do have a couple of topics, and I'll give time, but I have an interesting thing going on right now. A buddy of mine, Theo, I think some of you guys met. He visited us once before. He's got a thing happening with Bitcoin, and he's been trying to explain some simple concepts, or trying to take some complex concepts and make them simple concepts for some legislators. And so he'd asked me over the weekend if I wouldn't mind making a video explaining some 3 key components to Bitcoin and what makes them function. And so I was hoping if you guys would indulge me, I would share those things with you. I was having a lot of trouble doing it on my own, and I'm hoping in this setting we'll be more successful.
No. You can't do that without Bob. You can't.
We
you
need
can't
Bob
start
for the Bitcoin debate.
Yeah. Oh God.
Well, because of buffering.
Because of buffering. That's right. Nothing worse than your Bitcoins buffering. Mike, you had a question right off the head.
Should remain silent?
Well, not necessarily. I don't think that. I think what we'll end up with is some footage that he can piece through, and he can take some of the comments I make, and he may ask me to expand on some stuff later. But I'm hoping that I might be able to provide him what he's looking for just out of our meeting here.
Does he get paid for being expert?
Yeah, as much as I do. I know that.
Where's the release forms?
That's right. Well, you know, if you want, I
Can
can
you
focus
start
on
at the
myself.
beginning and tell us what Bitcoin
The
is?
history of Bitcoin. Well, we've talked about Bitcoin a number of times in the past, and it is a bit elusive as a concept. And Theo's concern is that there's a lot of legislation that's being wound up, and he doesn't feel like the legislators really know the right concepts to be focusing on. And when you're looking at regulation, when you're looking at making these decisions, he feels like he's narrowed it down to these 3 important aspects of why Bitcoin works and what we should be focusing on when we're making decisions about policy. And so I'm going to mention them now. His three concepts are the idea of consensus, immutability. How many times do I have to say that wrong? Immutability, 2 M's, and critical mass. And he feels that what we derive from Bitcoin works because of these 3 concepts. And so I'm just going to outline them very quickly for you guys. When we use the term consensus in terms of Bitcoin, what we're talking about, and actually I said in terms of Bitcoin, but really it probably could be in terms of any exchange that we're going, any kind of item that we're going to use for exchange, is that we've all agreed on the same system. And you see that in things like the dollar. We've all agreed that we're going to exchange the dollar for value. And so that's all consensus means, is that we've all decided that this is the way we're going to do things as a majority. It needs to be a majority. The idea of immutability is an old concept, but I don't think we give it much thought. And what this is referring to is the inability for something to change or be removed. And this is core to Bitcoin, is that the value that's derived from the Bitcoin that you have access to really relates all the way back to every transaction that was ever made from the very beginning of Bitcoin. I mean, this is a very interesting concept because this would be like every dollar being accounted for, and every one of us being able to account for it, that ever went anywhere in the world. You would be able to track back what generated that Bitcoin and how it was used later in the future. Gosh, why can't I say that word? Immutability is the idea that there's this progressive, ongoing, unalterable record of every transaction that's ever happened in it. So it's probably the thing that's going to protect from fraud, because you can always look back at this record. And it's one of the reasons that they're looking at cryptocurrency schemes for doing what they call smart contracts, because amendments and changes do not replace the original. They're just added to it. And you can track back to the beginning of time, or the beginning of that smart contract, any changes that were added to it. The third concept that he's concerned that people understand is critical mass. And when he talks about critical mass, what he's really trying to get across is that we need a large number of people agreeing in consensus. Not only agreeing in consensus to using the same system, but a key component is without trust. The system should work without me needing to trust you. It should work inherently without trust. And so the idea is that you inherently don't trust any of the players making transactions. All right. Does anyone have a question on any of that, just to begin with? Yeah, Chester.
I think your principle here in the second issue is accountability.
Accountability.
The fact that every transaction is recorded, and unlike the dollar, cannot be issued new.
Right.
You can't issue more.
That's right.
What you got is what you got.
That's right.
And
So
I understand also that certain banks now are considering it, issuing their own, like Chase and others are considering issuing their own currency,
so
Bitcoin.
now the problem with those kinds of concepts is that a bank represents a central authority that's maintaining. I mean, what they're essentially doing is they're adding an encryption scheme for wiring. They're basically taking over Western Union, right? They're taking that role. Whereas with the cryptocurrency in the form of this peer-to-peer form and this trustless idea, this idea that everyone involved in these transactions you inherently don't trust, is what makes this so stable, so functional.
Well, years ago, banks used to issue their own banknotes, like paper money that was strictly their bank.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's starting.
That's similar to what Chester's.
And that was before Roosevelt established the Federal Reserve.
And the big problem with that in these discussions is that that's an example of a consensus problem, because I may not want to take your bank's Bitcoin.
But there again, there's no accountability. I mean, the record.
What? And the accountability is only at the bank. You go to them to find out what happened. And in Bitcoin, oh yeah, go ahead, Judy.
I, as a consumer, why do I care about accountability?
Well, because that's what gives value to this.
Really? That means that anyone there can track my every movement. Is that not true?
That's right. There's a layer of anonymity,
That you,
as far as
that's
you
gone.
personally,
Yeah. Oh, there
is
it is.
is
Huh?
it's unpronounceable. It's,
Use both of them in the same sentence. Come on.
that's right. We'll turn into English Club.
Immutable anonymity.
So we can get into some of the nuances of how the transactions work, but the concepts that we're concerned about are sound regardless. That these are the things that give this value.
But the number
The-
two concept, the middle one, is the most important.
It-
Makes the others work.
Well, they all work in conjunction. And so, I mean, if we could go back to this idea of non-trust for a moment, the mechanism of this is that players in the Bitcoin network are keeping track of these accountability records, this immutability, this immuted, unchangeable database.
Let's call it M from now on.
Yeah.
Him.
There's incentives for them to keep track of them, but they are keeping track of them. And when it comes to deciding value, they come together. This is all virtually. I'm just talking in but there's a technical way. It all comes together, and they vote and determine which is the correct record. Now, all that happens automatically with an algorithm. Nobody's pushing a button. That's all inherent in the system. Oh, go ahead.
Well, two things. When, say, the U.S., at least in theory, we're supposed to have, say, the gold standard to back up the dollar. What backs this up? And two, isn't this basically a bartering system?
What backs this up are these three concepts. Yeah, I mean, you'll hopefully, if I'm doing this right, you will see where this backs it, because really, the gold standard's been gone for a long time. What backs our dollar is faith. That's it. It's faith-based currency.
So basically, this is a bartering system.
Well, maybe that's a correct way to think about it. You know, my friend Theo is always referring to it as an intangible commodity. And so when people are having trouble wrapping their head around what we're dealing with, it's really not a currency replacement. It's dealt with more like a commodity, but it's a commodity without substance. So you don't have to store it. You don't have to, you don't have to house it in warehouses and.
Her question is
Sure, Chester, you're probably better to answer it.
that it's not necessarily a commodity, because let's say you're trading pig for wheelbarrows. You can produce more wheelbarrows and produce more pigs.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you can destroy the relationship. But with the Bitcoin, they're limited. There's no more. So you can get a fraction of a Bitcoin, or a full Bitcoin, or 20 Bitcoins, but there's a limit to the number of Bitcoins in existence.
They say that by 2100 they will have issued all the Bitcoins. Because of the way the algorithm's written, no other Bitcoins will be created.
That's the key.
Kind of like gold, if we had never moved from the gold standard. Because everything would be attached to something of substance. And the difference here is the substance is intangible.
This is all paper transactions. You don't have a Bitcoin in your pocket running around.
No.
Would you
No.
make something?
But isn't there people that are banking on the fact that when they're all expended, that value can fluctuate and hopefully go up?
Well, it has
It-
been skyrocketing this year.
That's good.
It's actually very volatile, and that's another argument Theo makes for it being a commodity. I'm really sorry. He gave me information about commodities. I have not spent a lot of time looking at it from that perspective, so I'm not a good one to comment on. But I do want to get into the functioning of this, the critical mass, what that refers to, this consensus that we were talking about earlier, and am I going to say it again? Immutability.
Whoa!
Thank you, thank you.
Now, I thought the big motivation for Bitcoin success was its untraceable transaction for illicit, exchanges, drug money and all of that. And if the governments couldn't trace it, was why it was popular. The governments can't trace it. But
Well,
somebody can trace it.
they can be traced, and that's one of the big fallacies with it, is it's thought to be anonymous, but it's not. Your transactions are tied to a key that's associated with you. There may not be a record out there that says your name is connected to this key, but that key is always the same, so you can see all the transactions that were done from that wallet. Does that make sense? And so it's only a quick leap of investigation to figure out who owns that wallet. Yeah. Because
$100 million borrowed black market. Bitcoin are involved. Record, track, that transaction.
Yes, that is the case. Because of this immutable database, that transaction will forever exist. Actually, this database has gotten really big. It's like over 100 gigabytes in size. It takes a long time to download.
Are they the same as like when you deposit $10,000 at the bank with American cash and bring it to the IRS? Bitcoin reports.
Let's move back from all this for a moment, because I really want to get into the way this is working functionally from critical mass, and this non-trust idea. I heard an analogy. I was watching YouTube videos. I was trying to find an easy way to wrap my head around this, and I found this great analogy of playing poker without chips. And I thought it was very appropriate. It's easy to think about. If we were all to sit around and play poker and somebody forgot the chips, we'd have to figure out a way to keep track of the winnings. Now, Bitcoin. Chester, you were mentioning banks creating their own cryptocurrency. That would definitely be an example of one guy being the banker. He'd have one ledger. He'd keep track of your wins as well as his own, your loses as well as somebody else's. He might not be worried about his own loses, right? One ledger. But if we were to all agree that we would keep track of our own transactions, so you keep track of your wins and other people's wins, other people's losses, every one of us playing poker would have our own sheet of paper, and we would all be marking down this, ideally the same information on each sheet of paper. At the end of the day, or at the end of the game, we'd have to decide who won what. We'd bring these sheets of paper together. All right,
Sorry.
somebody didn't turn off
It's
their
me.
cell phone.
Sorry.
Is that a rule?
It is now, damn it. So at the end of the game, we would bring these sheets of paper together, these transactions, and we would compare them. And if we found something out of whack, we would vote that that wasn't correct. So, like, Bill couldn't say he won 200.
But I did.
Well, okay, you could say that all you want, but all our other sheets say you didn't.
Well, they're wrong.
Well, you can say that all you want, but we're going to go buy all the other sheets. That's the consensus.
But you're
And if there's enough of us keeping track of it, that's the critical mass. So we don't actually need everyone at this table keeping track of wins and losses. We just need enough that we have a consensus on who won and who lost that are the same.
You need a trusted person, which goes back to the idea of no trust.
No, you don't, because I don't have to trust anyone at the table.
Except yourself.
I don't have to trust myself. Well, I mean, I have to write down the right numbers, but I'll probably make a mistake, right?
That's wrong.
What if everybody was a cheater?
Exactly.
Well, if everybody was a cheater, then there would be no consensus, and so this concept wouldn't work.
I recently read where countries like China and Russia would like to see something like this come in international currency so that they get away from the dollar.
That is probably a very true statement, but I don't know how to comment on that. I mean, that's interesting, and I believe you. I don't see why they wouldn't. When we're dealing with faith-based currency that can just be rolled off of a printing press, why wouldn't you be looking for an alternative option? Yeah.
It's kind of like a euro.
Well, when the dollar was tied to the gold, then that was one thing, but when it's free floating, you can issue all you want, just print them away, which is what's happening.
So what is the quoted value in dollars?
What was the question? I'm sorry, Judy.
Why do they quote its value in dollars? When I look up Bitcoin and it says
Right.
price, it's quoted in dollars.
Well, because we're having to deal with it in the real world. I mean, again, this is really more to understand what brings value to Bitcoin. What makes it work? If one of these three components doesn't come, then it doesn't work as a commodity or as a currency. I mean, you have to have these three elements coming together. We have to all agree on the same system, which means you're not planning on cheating. You have to
Whether he plans it or not.
you have to have an accountability record that cannot be altered or changed. I mean, it can't be deleted. Every transaction you've ever done is accounted for, so if you go back through the history of things, you can see where that money came from and where it went. And you have to have critical mass. There has to be enough of us checking that, and I'm using us just a generality. It's actually computers out there that are doing the checking. But there has to be enough systems out there comparing these transactions and determining what are real and what's a mistake. And that's all I wanted to bring to you guys today. I hope that helps you, Theo.
The dollar to compare its value. Take the dollar away. How do you determine what it's worth?
Then it's big and with it.
Well, yeah, and that's his point. That's Theo's point very much so, is that the only reason we're in a dollar discussion is because that's where we're starting from.
Or barrels of oil.
Right.
If I buy your pigs with my Bitcoin, for Bitcoins, what I do with the Bitcoins once I get them.
Well, then you can buy wheelbarrows with them.
Is there any place you can trade them in?
Well, there are Bitcoin exchanges, and really, I'm not trying to sell you on any kind of. I don't have any investment advice, or I mean, I wouldn't even know where. If I knew how to make money with Bitcoin, you can bet I would already be in it.
They're making a market in Bitcoins like they make a market in.
I think these concepts are in terms of as we go into the future, as we're planning a new currency system. These are the kinds of concepts we want from it. We want it decentralized. We want it not to be controlled by any particular entity like a government or a bank. We want us to be the people deciding what the value is of these things. And that stems right out of these three concepts, is the fact that everyone's making this decision. We've all agreed that we're going to do this. We're all agreeing on what the value of this is. And everything that's done is transparent. You can't get away from that. That if you don't trust what's happened, you can look all the way back through the record. Yeah, Mike.
Speaking of commodities, a fellow the other day told me that he's got a broker who's going to invest his money into marijuana. It's legal.
Yeah.
Marijuana, almost like a commodity. Marijuana, we call it marijuana stock. I don't know if it's stock or commodity or what.
Marijuana futures?
Marijuana futures, yeah. So it looks like you don't even have to use Bitcoin for that anymore. Go right through a Canadian exchange.
When can we visit the plantation?
Bitcoin's probably not gonna work for our age group. Bitcoin is for the 20-somethings.
Yeah.
But Bitcoin's very volatile. If you don't have $1,000 to invest in Bitcoin and that you can lose, then you shouldn't do that.
You know, Linda, that's a very good point. As I was surfing through YouTube videos looking because I really wanted to focus on these concepts, I found investment people saying things like, if you want to invest in Bitcoin, consider it thrown away,
Yeah,
and then you win.
it's a pyramid scheme.
Well, no, I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't call it that. But because of the volatility, which is not really part of the discussion I'm trying to have here, but because of the volatility, that trying to make money out of it right now, you don't want to put money you're not ready to just throw in the trash. Because it's jumping. I mean, it gained 20,000 last year. One Bitcoin. It went from a few $100s up to $20,000, and then came back down. It was
Like 11.
But will you get
Yeah.
$20,000 if you go to turn it in? No. How can you?
Well, you can trade it in dollars.
They-
have
they've-
an exchange.
they do have exchanges.
Or
One
you can
one
sell it like a stock.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Chester.
Something everybody's going to disagree with, but in my view, ultimately, the United States will collapse.
That is the title of my podcast.
Just as Russia did. Just as Russia did.
Giving it a good workout, right?
And when all that begins to unfold, hopefully not in our lifetime, that there will need a worldwide currency, and it will be something like a Bitcoin, a international coin of their own that will take over. That's my opinion, and I will live with it.
Well, it happened in Rome.
I won't argue with you, Chester. I actually have predicted the same thing. I don't know if I mean collapse brings a lot of different images to people's minds. Everybody thinks it means a different thing, but I do believe that the dollar is doomed. I do believe that maybe you folks won't see it, maybe I won't see it, but my kids will definitely see the dollar disappear, and it will be replaced with a currency like this.
By the way, collapse has 2 L's.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that, looking over my shoulder. I got a spell checker, you know.
It's not working.
It's not at the moment. We're in the middle of a club meeting.
Well, you got to put that as your title.
Well, thanks. Now I'm derailed. Where did my engineer go?
To Chester's point, it's difficult to name a civilization
Mm.
Exactly.
This this is the progression of currency into the future. This is what we're looking for as an exchange of value in the future, is something like this. And Theo's point is these three components aren't intrinsic to Bitcoin. I mean, they are, but that's not a Bitcoin thing. That's applicable to anything that we're going to use to exchange for value. Is if we satisfy these three conditions, then it's valid, then it has value, then we'll accept it and use it. And that's what he wants legislators to be focusing on when they're thinking of regulation, to pull the idea of dollars out of this and to look at Bitcoin for the future. And when you're looking at regulation and tracking, to keep these three core ideas in mind.
One thing about that is the future of things is so short now.
Right.
That Bitcoin might be right in that basket. I mean, we've gone from, none of this stuff in 20 years to all of this stuff. And it's not going to be here 20 years from now the way it's done. So the same thing could happen in monetary stuff. Bitcoin could be the first one.
That's yeah.
Like the first boat to float.
I agree with you. And when I was reading about how they predict that the last Bitcoin will be generated by 2100, well, there's a good chance that we won't even be using that cryptocurrency by that time.
Now, the other thing for Theo is he might want to look at arguments about the adoption of the gold standard and the dismissal of the gold standard. Because I'll bet a lot of things that we're saying here today are repeats of what was said with both those eras.
See, was it Nixon that took us off the gold standard? I believe it's Nixon.
Well, was there a comment down on this end of the table here?
Who is generating this? How did this begin?
Okay, so let's get out of these three concepts, and I'll be happy to give you any information I have on the rest of this technology. This started back in the early 2000s. It was dumped out on the internet. So can I say his name? Does anybody have his name on it?
Satoshi Nakamoto.
There you go. Thank you. Satoshi Nakamoto is a.
What a memory. Yeah.
That's great. Judy is our official Googler. No, thank you, because I can't. Some of this stuff I can't say.
Checker.
Fact checker. Scott checker. So that's just a nom de plume. It's not a real name. He put together the algorithm. He had these concepts in mind when he put together the algorithm. The whole concept was to try and come up with a futuristic currency, some means of value exchange that could back itself up so nothing else had to. And it really did. It was just a novelty at first. People were just playing with it.
So was the internet.
Right, yeah. And something like this couldn't exist without the internet, because it really does require the exchange of this in real time to be able to do the comparisons and to set values. If you didn't have a network like the internet, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We would still be thinking about dollars.
Where are your Bitcoins then?
In your wallet.
Well, that's not a very futuristic. It's all solar. Weren't you here last week?
Some of this stuff is in your wallet. Bitcoins aren't.
Your Bitcoin, actually, I mean, to address that, your Bitcoins could be in your wallet in your phone, right? Or on a hard drive.
But if there's no power, there's no phone either.
Well, I mean, are you thinking we're going to like Planet of the Apes times in the future?
I've never even seen that.
It's, I mean, a Water World or Mad Max World. I mean, it's just hard to imagine that we would be without power realistically.
Well, it could get blown out for a short period of time at least.
Sure. Yeah. Well, again, we're planning the future of currency. We're not saying that we're going to switch over to this right now. I mean, all of these are pitfalls with it right now. But as we move farther into the future, those become insignificant. And And I would use the analogy of things like dial-up versus high-speed internet. I mean, the amount of work we used to do to get something, like download a song on dial-up. It's one song, 20 minutes from a pirated site to get one song, right? And now you can download 4K movies and watch them in line, right? In Mexico, you can watch 4K movies downloaded in line with your high-speed internet. You don't even give it a thought anymore. And that's what's going to happen with things like power, is that we're going to reach a point where solar, wind, alternative sources, and traditional sources are all going to converge, and you're going to be like 99% covered with electricity. It's not going to be a real issue. What's that?
Australia will be a battery.
Will be a battery.
I'd love to see that undersea cable.
Not up close, though.
It's going to be broadcast. It's going to be broadcast.
This is sort of changing the subject, but you know,
Tesla,
we all
after all.
complain about Telcel and Telmex here. Just go down your Puerto Vallarta, it is so bad. If you're not in your hotel with it on, and you go out on the street, you've got your phone, you virtually cannot get anything. And I think of all the trouble, you know, a month down there, was down there for a month this year, last year, this was my 4th year down there. It's so terrible, and we complain so much up here. I say we don't hardly have any problem up here compared to what they have down there.
Are you talking about LTE speeds?
I'm telling you about just being able
To make phone calls.
to make phone calls, to get the internet to stay on.
Mhm.
It constantly goes off. I mean, you know, pretty much if you're up here and you're watching Netflix, you're not having any problem.
Yeah, we finally reached
Okay,
that
down
point.
there, it's forever. It's forever. You're watching the movie, it's going around.
Can I explain the very current problem that I have like that?
Sure, Chester. Let's change the topic because
Chester's
you will
movies.
quickly drain me of my Bitcoin knowledge.
I've been having, you know, as most of you have heard me say, I have Hope Box, and I have a Buffalo router. Maybe it's not a router, but whatever it is, Buffalo. And every morning I'm having to reboot it. And so I've been in communication with Utopia about what is this
Ytopia,
problem?
yeah.
And so they told me how to when it was off, how to download my log on the Buffalo and send it to them. And I got a response this morning. There's nothing wrong with my Buffalo. What is happening is that Megacable is instantly, from time to time, breaking its signal. Now, if you're watching Netflix or you're on your computer, you've got a delay in there so it doesn't really affect you, but it affects that Buffalo. And it may be that those of you that are having VPNs and having trouble with them, and you have Netflix, it's because there's a break from time to time in the signal.
Chester, I think you suspected that Megacable was having a problem before all that. But if you could get your tech support to highlight those breaks, then you have in hand the ability to report to Megacable where they're falling down on you.
Yeah.
You could go in there with a log.
And for months it didn't happen.
Now it's happening.
And
Megacable is a, it's a copper. No, but it's a good topic. Megacable is coaxial cable, and it's subject to flying around in the wind and getting hit with salt water and connections getting loose and corrosion. And what do you want to bet? It's something like that down your line that's causing a problem.
Because it used to never happen.
Right.
Well, it's subject to miracles.
It isn't your cable on your roof that's
It could be.
Could be.
corroded?
Could be.
Because when I lived over by the beach, you know, over at Miramar, and we had Megacable, we had to have the cable replaced a couple of times because it had rotted out laying on the roof from the sun.
Yeah.
Could well be anything like that.
And the salt, you live right on the water, even though we don't have that.
You
We
brought
don't
up
have
the
that
topic,
big of
and
a salt problem.
it's very current for me like today.
Yeah.
Well, I've had a Megacable problem for a couple of weeks, and I've also had a miracle. It just suddenly started working. Nobody come by, nobody said a word, nobody
I'm looking for.
Yeah, the miracle.
Your algorithm didn't make
Thoughts
it.
and prayers.
That's what it is.
Thoughts and
Thoughts
prayers.
and prayers. It's amazing what thoughts and prayers can do.
Can stop bullets.
I don't know about that.
Well, they've been trying for many years now.
Yes.
I have a new topic.
A new topic.
So yesterday about 6 o'clock, I got a call on my cell phone. I have an AT&T phone. So I get a call on my phone that's my number calling me.
Your number calling you.
My number calling me.
That's
Comes up,
suspicious right off the bat.
Judith Alwood. And so you answer it and they say, this is AT&T calling. Please enter your password or your, and we have to verify that everything is okay. So I think, okay, well, that's ridiculous. So I call.
Good for you. That's
I
good
call
computer club
611.
mind right there.
611 I call, and for 61 minutes, I was on hold with their fraud protection.
Wow.
Until I really got too annoyed and hung up.
So many other people are doing.
I guess.
reporting the same thing.
Or they just put me into that queue that just goes around and nobody ever answers it.
The Pharisees.
Carol, my wife, called yesterday. Supposedly someone at Verizon had Verizon caller, and they said you have a $29.16 overpayment, so we need to give you a credit.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
Well, we need your PIN number in order to be able to do this. Right. Well, tell you what, you send me an email, and then I'll call you back about what's going on. But she wound up immediately calling Verizon, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
The IRS currently has a scam going on where they're filing for you a refund that goes to you. Right. And then they call you up and say, well, we are the IRS, you've got to return that. Right. And IRS you can get a deposit over the phone. You can get a check from the IRS, got that check, and then they'll call you and want it back.
The IRS is doing that?
No, the IRS. No.
What are you gonna say?
Let's go to the FBI. Maybe the FBI.
They've got a different sending address, right?
A different bank for deposit.
Right.
Well, the other IRS scam that's been going on, and I've had to deal with, I keep getting calls from them, is they'll call you up, I'm an officer with the IRS, or you need to contact us, or your warrant will be issued for you. Right? I have a friend that works in criminal investigations for IRS in Anchorage, and I called him up right after I got it. And after a while, I got bored with the phone calls, and I was giving him all the numbers I had that were using the dial. So you're getting an IRS office number from DC. He told me, well, next time they call up, just hang on a second, somebody wants to talk to you, and tell them you're a cop. I got a phone call, I answered it, listened to the guy for a minute, I go, excuse me, somebody wants to talk to you. I took the phone, did my fake voice, this is Officer Johnson of the Alaska State Troopers, click, haven't heard from him since.
My son-in-law did a good call too. I'm so glad you called, because he just declared bankruptcy. This is wonderful. No more.
There was a few years ago, somebody was dealing with scammers like that, and they were able to convince them to meet them on the street for a money exchange. And the meeting place they intentionally picked was in front of a camera so that they could get a picture of who the scammer was. Right? And I think that's a pretty... I mean, we should have a place we know in San Carlos has a constant webcam going. And so you go, oh yeah, meet me here.
That's your host.
How about Cyberco?
Yeah, right. Cyberco, yeah.
Cyberco.
That's right.
Do it at the fountain by the country club.
Yes.
On the same line, we spend time in Green Cove Springs and Florida. We got kids there. And if you are buying or selling something on eBay, you do it in the police parking lot.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Yeah.
Same thing with
Or Craigslist, yeah. Ah,
Very good.
that is a good idea.
There's some things on Craigslist that you not do on this.
in a police parking lot. You're absolutely right, Mike. Thank you for reminding us of that.
What
There-
was that, Mike? What-
Yeah.
Give us an example.
You can definitely use your Bitcoin for it, though. I brought one other topic that I thought you guys would really appreciate. And this is how to create disposable email addresses. I found a really interesting article this morning on Digital Trends that talked about like 6 different ways that you could create temporary email addresses for those annoying systems that you want to try out but always want to register an email address. I'm sure that you've had times, we've probably talked about things that you might be interested in looking at but didn't really want to commit to, and definitely didn't want to get on some junk mail list. And so this is a way you could do that. You could go try out some new service without having to give up your favorite email address. The article, I'll post it on our website. They went through 6 different ways, but I wanted to mention 2 that I tried out that just really caught me off guard how easy and useful they were. One is your Gmail account. If you have a Gmail account, Gmail has this really interesting way, I didn't know it existed until this article, that you can take your username, like my username at Gmail is internationalcsi@gmail.com. I can amend to the username the plus and add whatever I want at gmail.com. So in this case, I was doing a test. I wrote International CSI plus test at gmail.com. Well, that comes right into my Gmail address, my inbox, just like if it had been addressed correctly. But it has stamped on it that username, that plus test added to it. What that means is later you can filter on that address. So you can say any emails that come to this address, go to the trash can. Right? You don't have, or you could use it like International CSI plus Megacable at gmail.com. And I know that whenever Megacable's responding to me, they're going to be using that email address, and I could have a folder sitting to the side called Megacable, and it's just supposed to filter all those into that folder. So I thought that was a pretty powerful technique that I didn't know that existed until today. And it works just right out of the box. All I had to do was address an email, and it started coming in with that address. Go ahead.
So
I want
don't have to do it on Gmail. I can
Nope.
do it.
You can do it on the fly.
Wow.
So yeah, so you're approached by something that asks for an email. Maybe you're feeling a little sketchy about just handing out your favorite email address. If you have a Gmail account, you can just append that plus concept.
But that's with
Yeah.
Plus, and then a word or number or something.
Yeah, however you want to identify that email address, and they're all valid.
And that sets up a new account.
No, it comes into your account, but it comes in with that email address. Like I said before, my Gmail account is internationalcsi@gmail.com. To use this, I could go to something like Telcel, and they ask me for my email address when I'm signing up for service. I could say internationalcsi plus Telcel@gmail.com. All their correspondence would be coming into my inbox, exactly where I expect to find them, but they're stamped with International CSI plus Telcel. So then I can filter those. I can put them in the trash. I can put them in a Telcel folder. But better yet, I can track whether they've sold my email address to some garbage list, because when I start getting garbage, if it's marked with that email, I know where I got put on that list. Yeah. So, well, the disadvantage of the Gmail thing is that you're filtering it, so you're not really killing it at any time. You can tell it to go screw itself, but it will still continue to come in. You can put it so that it never bothers you, but it's definitely bothering Gmail.
But you can go back to the company and disenroll yourself from their mailing Spotify, supposedly.
Sure.
If it's a newsletter or something like that, you don't want it anymore.
But it's still out there.
Yeah. but it's still out there. Go ahead, Bill. What's the question?
I use a company called Blur.
Blur. I haven't heard of Blur.
BLUR, and they will set you up. You got to set up an account with them. But when you go to enter an email address, like when you fill in a form, it'll cut in and say, do you want to generate a new email address? And they just generate some garbage number.
Okay.
And then they will also generate a garbage password.
I will check out Blur. I'll add it to my list here.
And you can go in and you go to their site, you look at your account, you can take out the temporary ones. They still come to the Gmail account. They come in and it'll have a tag on it that says something about it's been forwarded to you. You can eliminate it.
Yeah, a lot of these services will do things like that. Like
the other thing they do, if you go into their paid side, this is the free one. You go to the paid side, you can generate a temporary credit card. So you got some place you want to spend $6.37. You don't want to use your Visa number. It'll go through and it'll generate a fake or a temporary one.
You're saying Blur provides that service. So they have your credit card and they give you fake credit card numbers.
Yes, you've got to give them some way of paying for it.
Okay.
So they will generate a one-time use, a burn credit card. That's what it is.
That's great. That's none of these suggestions that I read in the article had that kind of feature.
I don't use that one. I just know it's there.
Well, in the case of Gmail, let's say I get an email from XYZ Auto Company.
Mm-hmm.
I put that in a spam, and then any future emails from XYZ Auto Company go to spam.
Goes straight to
spam.
Right.
That's handy.
But
Move it to spam.
Just move it to spam. No, it just
Well,
says, okay, this is a spam, and it goes there.
I think that you can take each one of these and use them in different circumstances. And I actually tested two other things. I did the Gmail. That was very easy to do. These other two are very easy to do. Some of these other names are Mail Drop, Mail Eliminator, Gorilla Mail, 10-Minute Mail. I messed around with Mail Eliminator, which is very easy. MailEliminator.com.
Mail Eliminator or Mailinator?
Mailinator, thank you. Mailinator. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, maybe you're a better one. Do you have something you want to comment on
Well,
it?
you can create a email on the fly. Mine is Fred at mailinator.com.
Right.
And all you do is go to the Mailinator website after you've sent that email or subscribed to whatever it is, and it'll show up in the queue. You look at it, and
there's no password required.
No password. There's no remembering. I mean, you can make something as simple as you want.
How long does it last? Is it 10 minutes or is it an hour? A couple hours, I think, is what I read.
A couple hours, something like that.
So the idea is that you create a username just off the cuff at Mailinator. Mailinator. That's Mail INATOR. Mailinator.com. That's the email address you use. Whatever you made off the cuff at Mailinator.com. And then later you go to Mailinator.com, put in your email address, and it pops up the messages for you. You don't need a password, and they're volatile. They'll disappear within a couple of hours. But at that point, you can do things like copy them, forward them on, reply to them.
It's usually they send an email to that email address to confirm your subscription. That's all you need it for.
Like a validation email. So like you might want to use a service, but you don't want them to have your email address, but they won't let you use the service until you validate it. Yeah. You can use something like that. Gary? Oh, well, let me mention the other one that I used that I was just amazed at how quickly it worked was 10minutemail.com. And it's the number 10 minute, the word minute, the word mail.com. Now, if you go to this website, it immediately generates an email for you. It's some nonsensical email address, but it's valid. And you can just take that and hand it over to whatever's asking for an email. And for 10 minutes, that's a valid email address. For 10 minutes, that web page will show email coming in. It actually has a 10-minute counter on it, so you can watch it count down until it's not a valid email any longer. An email will come in, you can copy, you can forward, you reply to emails that come in, but after 10 minutes, that email is no longer a good email address. So just like the validation example, if you needed to validate a service, you go to 10minutemail.com, get the email address, put that in the service, and wait for their email to come, and those validators are no more than just clicking on a link that came in email. And you validated the service, and you're done with 10minutemail.com. Any questions?
If you
Gary.
plug your computer into a 6-foot Cat5 and do a speed test on it, and then plug it into a 6-foot Cat5, you get the same result.
Yeah.
Exact same result.
Yeah.
And you're getting less. What does that imply?
A problem with the cable.
Mailing, M-A-I-L-I-N-A-T-O-R.
Actually, a question about that, Cat. They're all the way up to like Cat 7?
Yeah, I don't know
6
what
so
that-
far.
Yeah, 6 right now. They have, yeah.
I read something the other night on that they're up to 7. Do you really need it?
That would
You
be a
need
10
6?
gig.
I've seen 6, but I haven't found a use for it in particular. Just Cat5.
There are uses for it, but I don't think I'm looking at a table of people that could. I mean, the use of it is so. The difference is so marginal.
That's what I was
You would where you could take advantage of those kinds of speeds would be, and first all your equipment would have to be gigabit or better. But how you'd take advantage of it is you have like a 4K DVR on the other side of the room, and you're trying to get it to another device, and so that would be a good constant way to get that much capacity.
The monster cable product.
Right. It'd be $100 for that cable, but it would have shiny ends on it. Gold-plated ends.
Yeah,
My other
digital.
question in that regard was if you check internet speed with 2 different computers from the same source, should they be the same?
Relatively speaking. There's always just 2 different tests, even on the same computer with the same cable, could have different speeds.
Well, I have one computer plugged in that far away from the modem,
Mm-hmm.
and another one 60 feet away in the bedroom. And the speed on the near one is 24 megs, and the speed on the far one is 9 megs.
Yeah, that sounds like a cable problem.
Take the computers and change their places.
That's a good suggestion, just to make sure it's not the equipment.
Yeah.
That's a
Just
good
plug-
suggestion.
Plug the long one into the close one and see what it does.
An older cable, an older NIC, older firmware on the network card.
That's a real good suggestion. Because that could very well be. It could be a driver issue that's having problems with it. You should be, when you plug that cable in, at the very least, you should be getting 100 megabits a second. The newer equipment's getting 1 gigabyte a second. Actually, that could be an issue too. It could think that it could push 1 gigabit, but it can't, and so it's spending all its time doing error checking. And so that would lower the speed.
So what's the solution for this? Is it the cable wired wrong, or it does work, but it's obviously the wire function at top?
Yeah,
Speed.
it could be that it's damaged somewhere, and it's not allowing it to go at the full potential. It could be the cables, I don't know, nicked or something, radio interference. It could be running parallel to power lines.
Too sharp a corner.
The cables get old?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, run over it with a chair a few times. That'll get old.
Yeah, they wear out and they corrode, and their insulators will deteriorate over time. And you have other problems like termites eating insulators or rodents eating insulators. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the sun baking a cable if it's sitting outside.
Inside a house?
Well, I would have to say yes, just because of the way things age. I would expect it to get bad. I mean, marginally bad. It would take a long time. You know, what they say on electronics is store them in a cool, dry place. You don't live in a cool, dry place. There's nothing cool and dry about this place. Okay.
to hook up to watch my IPTV.
Right.
Okay, and I've been noticing that I'm getting more,
See you, Bill. John, nice to meet you. Go ahead, Linda.
what's the word I want?
Immutable.
Immutable.
Where the circle's going round and round in the bedroom versus not in the living room.
It could be the cable.
So it could be the cable.
It
right
could be the
from
cable.
there. So maybe if I went and got a new cable,
Mm-hmm.
How long is the cable?
well, it runs from the desk along the floor through the closet and into the other bedroom right there, where I've got the TV all hooked up.
How old is the cable?
Well, we've been there 4 years now,
So
going on 4 years, and I had it before.
So it's older than 4 years.
Yeah.
And is it exposed to traffic? Like, are people in the last 4 years or so,
No.
has it been stepped on or?
Vacuuming, is it in the way?
That's a good way to
It's
put that
sitting on the
question.
floor with all with my big box.
Yeah.
You know, where I have everything plugged in, and the girls must hit it like with the broom and stuff, because I noticed that my Magic Jack, sometimes I come home after the girls have been there, and the Magic Jack, you know, because you know how the Magic Jack plugs in and it's kind of wobbly?
Yeah.
And then I came home and I saw my Magic Jack was off.
And
The girls had just been there and cleaned before we got home from vacation.
if you can climate control the cable and protect it like in a conduit, there's no reason to think that it wouldn't last years without a problem.
Right.
But if you got it running across the floor or outside across the roof, you can expect it to have problems over years.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe I should just go get them to make me a new cable at Garcia's.
Yeah, something like that. Or Aranda.
Maybe it's the
It
ends.
might be the ends. I mean, ends go bad when they get stepped on. See you guys. See you next week. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
You can hang out another 4 minutes. We could. This is why I don't start early. Yes, Ed. How can I help you?
I've got memory sticks,
Okay.
or whatever you want to call them, thumb drives, memory sticks. I plug it into my computer, it will not register it.
Okay.
It just says it exists. You put it in somebody else's computer and it works fine. I tried to find drivers for them, I can't find them.
It's not a driver issue.
Yeah.
It's a drive letter issue more than likely. It's trying to set itself on a drive letter that's already being used. Drive letter like C or D, E, and so unfortunately I haven't found an easy approach to this. You have to go into the disk manager. In Windows 10, you can do that by right-clicking on the Start button and choose Disk Manager and associate. What that'll show you is a list of all your drives, and you'll find one there without a drive letter. And you just need to select that and choose the option. Where is it? Well, actually, and it's the partition that you have to select. The partition on that drive. You have to select that, and then with the right mouse button, and it's change drive letter.
But you know what I've also noticed? Sometimes if you put a stick in the Android, and then you come and you try to put it back into Windows, it wants you to redo the FAT32.
Oh, well, repair it. Yeah.
Repair it.
Yeah. But you'd first have to be recognized before it asks you to repair.
New letter in your Windows?
So, well, no, it needs to find a letter it can use before it can tell you that there's something wrong with
So if
it.
you put the card in and it says to find the letters, if you right-clicked on it, wouldn't it take you to redoing the step?
The repair can't be done unless it already found a letter that will work. Okay. So this is before you found a letter. You plug it in and nothing happens.
Nothing.
You might even get a gong, like a sound that it's been plugged in, but you can't use it.
Okay.
So you go into
Disk management.
and you see your disks listed there. At the moment, I've only got one hard drive with 3 partitions.
Right.
A jump disk would show up as another disk, and it would have a partition, and you'd select that partition, and then with the right mouse button, you'd click on that, and you'd choose Change Drive Letter and paths.
Okay.
And then this opens up a dialog. Shows you whatever it thinks. It'll probably be blank, because that's the way it looks when it doesn't have one. And you choose Change, and here you can select what letter you want to use.
Oh, I see. Okay.
After you've done this in the computer that it's not showing up in, it should forever show up with that drive letter until something else changes.
Okay.
It'll also be a problem. I always try and choose from Z forward, because when you plug in more devices, they all increment C, D, E, F. They go down the alphabet, and if you manually set them when you're having these problems to start at the end of the alphabet, it won't get in the way of other devices, so you won't have that experience again.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So it goes all the way to Z?
That's right.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, it's kind of interesting. It's not very applicable to you folks, but if you're in a Windows network environment where you're using a domain server for your security and resources, when you sign into it, it assigns your network drive to Z to begin with, and every device that you connect scale down from Z, so that they don't conflict with things that are getting plugged into the device.
To Linda's point earlier about this generation not using Bitcoin, I just did a little research on the overlap between using Windows 7 and Bitcoin ownership, but it's 0.
Anybody running Windows 7 is not doing any Bitcoin. Well, that's got to be a fair data set there, right? You do know the new statistics show Windows 7 at 50% usage, so it's 50% usage. Still.
Well, how much of that is government and business?
It's all government. I think it's a three-way pie chart that's divided between government, business, and curmudgeons. It's. I will not.
Well, not that Bob isn't here. I don't know where Bob is.
Speaking of Windows 7.
Bob's waiting for his hearing aids in Tucson.
Oh.
What?
You mean
phone ring.
He didn't stop at Harbor Freight and buy the $10 one.
Well, I have exhausted the two topics that I have brought. I'm still happy to answer any questions anybody else has brought.
I bought myself a new Mac Pro, and I need tutoring.
Oh, great.
Okay, so
Well, let's set up some time, and I can give you a hand with it.
this week is great. Anytime you got it.
Okay, give me a second to close this out, and we'll set up a time. Is there any other questions I can help people with? Our table has diminished down to a much smaller group, as we can see from my panning shot. Hello, Jim.
It's like a poker table. People are folding.
That's right. They need to turn in their logs so we know who won. Well,
Thank you for making me feel better.
this has been the San Carlos Computer Club. I am Scott Stimson with International Computer Solutions. Thank you for joining us this morning. We meet every Tuesday from 9:15 to 10:15-ish here at Tequila's in San Carlos. If you are in San Carlos and interested in some good food, this is the place to go. If you're interested in our meeting, come at 8:30 on a Tuesday and have breakfast before we start our meeting. A lot of people are doing it. If you're looking for computer help, I'd appreciate it if you would get a hold of me in my offices. Locally, we're 226-0209, but you can also find us on the internet at internationalcs.net. I guess that's it. Until next week, tech on.